Well, thank you everyone for attending today. I'll be talking about the career program. It's a solicitation. We've been learning about the various funding mechanisms. So the career program is a solicitation, and you should write down or have etched in your brain NSF 22-586, because that's the name of the career solicitation. Download it. Have it, handy in your download folder of your computer so you can access it and read it several times. So because it has all the objectives and a lot of important information that makes this program and its proposals different from proposals that you might submit to the core programs across NSF. Oh yeah, I have the controls. Okay. So it's a foundation-wide activity that really represents NSF's most prestigious awards in support of early career faculty. And it has these two objectives. And again, this is really important. This is another distinguishing piece of the career proposal. It serves to provide 5 years of steady funding to lay the foundation for your career as a leader in research and a leader in education. So you as a leader in education and you as a leader in research. So I really think of that as having two pillars that you're making the case for in your proposal. And it really lays the foundation for activities that should build this firm foundation for a lifetime in leadership. So it has really lofty goals from the start of this for this program in the career program NSF 22-586. Again, that's hopefully a theme of leadership in education and leadership in research. This version 22-586, I think this might be the third cycle for it, but just to remind you, the deadline is the fourth Wednesday in July. So for this year, it's July 24th, 2024, and it's at 5 p.m. local time. We talked about earlier in the conference of what location constitutes the local time. So be sure you know that for your particular institution. It might not be actually where you are as a PI. It's the institution's location. I'll talk about this in a little bit. We also just added some clarification language for the purpose of the departmental chair letter, which is a required piece of the proposal. We have also an additional single copy document. That means that the reviewers do not see it, for the PI to self-declare that they are eligible for the PCASE program, which is a Presidential Early Career Award in Science and Engineering. And of course, we've been talking about all this week that your submission is through research.gov or grants.gov, but we highly recommend you submit it through research.gov because it has all these checks before you even get to the end of submission. So you'll have a better chance to make sure that you know your proposal is at least compliant with all the requirements, both for the PAP-G 24-1 and the solicitation 22-586. So just some highlights. This is a new slide. Again, we have a new PAP-G. It covers the submissions for this July submission window for the career program. And I just highlighted some things that this is not an exhaustive list. So first of all, definitely review all the changes and the requirements for the PAP-G 24-1. One thing I highlighted was this new mentoring plan that not only covers postdocs that you might have on your proposal, but also graduate students. So make sure that you fulfill this requirement, because this is another requirement that, for example, research.gov will make sure that you have, so you don't get into trouble. And when I just discussed this 5 p.m. local time. Be sure that you understand what that is for your institution. And there's updated guidance for what your biographical sketch will have. So make sure you meet those requirements. So that's just specific to the PAP-G, so which is, again, 24-1. So focusing on career and its requirements. You can read the solicitation 22-586. And there's another document, our facts document, 22-100. Kind of write those numbers down because those are two documents in addition to the holy PAPG 24-1, that these three documents will help guide your way for submitting a really compelling career proposal. Projects are 5 years. We sometimes have been getting questions, can I have a career project for 4 years? And the answer is no, it's a 5-year project. And again, we've been talking about this week that your proposal has to be compliant with 24-1 PAPPG. This is bad that my voice is already going. And we get a lot of questions on eligibility. I'll go through it in a bit. But the first thing, it's your status. The status is you as a PI as of the submission date. So again, for this cycle, it's the 4th Wednesday in July. So that's July 24th, 2024 for this year. And whatever your status is as of July 24th, that determines your eligibility. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's how it works. Because we get a lot of questions of, for example, you're up for tenure and your tenure has been granted, but when is it actually active? That may determine eligibility. And I'll kind of go back to that. So submission, again, is through research.gov or grants.gov, and we really recommend you use research.gov. I'm going to sound like a broken record with some of these themes, but they're important. I want to do another advertisement. This Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a logistics webinar on submitting your career proposal through research.gov. And I give an email for questions that you might have that you can submit now. You sign up for this webinar on the homepage of research.gov. And so that's really important because it's going to walk you through all the steps of using research.gov for your career proposal. And it's so it's really, really handy. One of the hardest things I have, and as part of my job with the career program, is we have a meeting of our committee after the deadline to look at all the cases of people who did not submit their proposal on time to determine if it's late submission. And usually the answer is no, because it's a lack of coordination between the PI and the research office, which is not the fault of NSF. So those are really hard meetings. So I like to have as little cases or 0 cases as possible. So definitely coordinate and know the deadline timeline at your particular institution so that the institution, which includes you as a PI, can submit the proposal by the proposal deadline. So some questions I've been getting this week is, should I submit a career proposal versus a regular proposal? I mean, kind of like a submission to the core program. And just to emphasize, career proposals are single PI projects. So there's no co-PIs on the cover sheet. And again, at the beginning, I kind of stressed that it includes activities to help build a firm foundation for you as a leader, as an educator, and as a leader in research. And they're ambitious 5-year projects. The career proposal requires this departmental chair letter, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And the goals are lofty. Again, they're a lot of work. These 2 pillars to establish your career as an educator and researcher. So it's best to really talk with your departmental chair and your mentors to say, where are you in your career as at your institution, is if you're ready to submit a career proposal or not. Of course, I want to emphasize that as an early career researcher, you are eligible to submit to all the other programs at NSF. The career program is not your only option for submitting to NSF. You can submit proposals to all the core programs and special solicitations, as well as, as long as you fit the particular eligibility requirements that they might have, for a special solicitation. So for eligibility, you have to have a doctoral degree by the proposal deadline. So again, it's all about your status as of the deadline date. So for this year, it's the fourth Wednesday in July, and that's July 24th, 2024. You must be untenured and employed in at least a 50% tenure track or tenure track equivalent, assistant professor or equivalent position at an eligible institution as of the annual deadline. So again, it's your status as of July 24th, 2024 for this cycle. You have to have research and educational responsibilities and have not previously received a NSF career award. That does not apply to any other early career awards that might be from another agency. And you basically have 3 tries to go through review. And your eligibility is certified in the required departmental letter. So I'll talk about that. So there was a lot of equivalence in that previous slide. So you might have a position that's not labeled as tenure track, but you are potentially still eligible to apply to the career program. So any non-tenure track faculty is potentially eligible. However, if you have a purely adjunct faculty position, you are not eligible. Your appointment should be continuing, that is expected to last the 5 years of the career award. And I want to highlight the word expected. This is not something that your institution does have to guarantee you employment for 5 years. It's not a legal guarantee. It's using the word expected, that your position, if you're in this non-tenure position, it's expected to last the 5 years, but it's not a guarantee of employment that your institution is making. The appointment should have substantial research and educational goals and be equivalent to pre-tenure. And of course, you have to meet all the other eligibility requirements that I had in the previous page. And again, your eligibility is certified by your institution through this required departmental letter. And there, the last bullet, I kind of emphasize again that the language is expected to last, not guaranteed to last. So again, the institution is not making any guarantees or promising full employment. So this is a required piece of the proposal departmental letter. And this is one of the pieces that if you submit it and it's missing, this is a case for return without review. And that's, again, really hard things on both sides. We don't enjoy doing this, but make sure this is a required piece of the proposal. It's 2 pages max. And its main purpose is for the institution to indicate that the PI is eligible for the career program based on the PI status as of the submission date. So for this cycle, it's July 24th. It should include a description of how the PI's career goals and responsibilities mesh or align with the organization or the department. And the letter has a commitment to the PI's proposed research and education activities and how they're going to contribute to the professional development of the PI with mentoring. And I just want to emphasize that the departmental letter is not a letter of support. Its main purpose is really to these items, eligibility, that the project is aligned with the department and or organization goals, and they commit to basically what you put in the proposal and to the PI's mentoring. It's not a letter of support. We're increasingly seeing very glowing, flowery departmental letters, and that is not the purpose. It's really these purposes, very succinct and clear. And this is part of the proposal package. So the reviewers have access to this, and this is part of the piece of the proposal that they're evaluating against the criteria. Okay. Budgets. Budgets is an important discussion to have with the program director of the program that you're thinking to submit your career proposal to. Again, this is across the foundation. You can see in the solicitation that there's budget minimums that do vary across the foundation, but you won't see maximum values. So that's why you need to talk to the program director of the program that you're thinking to submit to, because the size of projects do vary across the foundation. But one thing I would say, in my own opinion, is to make sure that the content, what you include as part of your career projects, supporting the research and educational activities and any activities you include to support the broader impacts of the project, is aligned with the resources. And one of the resources is the budget. So for the review phase, I think it's a good idea to make sure they're aligned. You can also request buyout of academic year time for teaching intensive institutions, and that's a question for your program director. And again, the norms for career proposals vary across the foundation. But in my opinion, I suggest you align the resources with what you want to do for the review phase. Of course, all projects are subject to budget negotiation if they're selected for award. But in my opinion, it's good to have the alignment of resources and scope for the review phase. This is this slide doesn't have to do specifically with the career program. It's just some requirements from the PAPG of unfunded collaborators. And so and you can include collaborators, it's good to have that letter of collaboration that has that one stock phrase that's in the PAPPG, but it's important to describe these persons' roles either in the facilities, equipment, and other resources section or the program description. But again, this is not specific to career. Let's see, I forgot one thing on budgets. For career proposals, you can include budget for senior personnel on your project. You can include subawards, you can include consultants, but there's a balancing act. You want to make sure that the career proposal is all about you. And so if you have any collaborators or you have actually budget for senior personnel or consultant, all those roles should give the perception of having a minor role in the project's intellectual merit and broader impacts because the career proposal is all about you. So it is a balancing act, but you can include budget for senior personnel on a career project proposal. So career varies across NSF, and you submit to your career proposal to a core program or a core discipline program. I already talked about kind of award sides vary, and also the expectation of the scope varies across the foundation. So that's why it's really important to have these discussions with the program directors of the program that you're going to submit to. And it might be you might have to have more than one discussion with more than one program because your lab probably aligns with more than one core program at NSF. And so it's up to you to design, especially for the career proposal, that your scope of your project most aligns within one program. That's just the way it's designed. It might have some fuzzy edges that touch other programs, but as much as possible, you want to design your career project so it most aligns with the program that you submit. And if your research is inherently interdisciplinary, again, you might have a little more legwork to kind of design your project and also contact those program officers of maybe more than one program to kind of say, given that this is what I want to do, what might be the best fit so you can make the most informed decision in your submission of your career proposal. Your proposal is evaluated by external reviewers, and that's your audience. So it's important to know your audience. And this is another question to ask the program director of the program that you're thinking of submitting to is how will it be reviewed in general? Of course, we're not going to go into names. But there's different processes. Program directors have flexibility of how they do the external review. We've been learning, we have external panels, we have ad hoc or written reviews, or maybe a combination of both. But this is your audience. And so it's important to understand how your career proposal is going to be reviewed. I just noticed I have 75 minutes. I'm not going to take 75 more minutes, but I just wanted to, So here's just examples across the foundation of how career proposals are reviewed. I'm in engineering, and so in engineering, we have dedicated proposal panels, and every proposal is discussed. But that varies across the foundation, but this is what I call kind of the review environment or your audience. So it's important to understand that. So this is a valid question to ask the program director of the program that you're thinking of submitting your proposal to. You're talking to the reviewers, and the reviewers are going to be using the intellectual merit and the broader impacts criteria to evaluate your project. An additional consideration for career proposals is this integration of research and education. Again, remember at the top, I think of this proposal as providing 5 years of steady funding to lay that firm foundation for you as a leader, as an educator and a leader in research. So it has these dual pillars. And so the integration of this is a consideration. It's not technically a solicitation specific review criteria, but is an important consideration for you to basically keep in mind in the writing of your career proposal. Intellectual merit, of course, is the potential to advance knowledge in that particular field of science or engineering, and broader impacts focus on benefits to society and desired societal outcomes. And this integration of research and education, that's an additional piece that's really central to a career proposal. And the goal is can you make the case of how does your research, your role as a researcher and your research enrich your role as an educator? But also the flip side as well. How does your role as an educator enrich your research program and your role as a researcher to make that case? So that's what we're meaning by that. This is the exact language. I think I've seen at least one other slide this week that has it, but this is your tool set. This is what the reviewers are using to evaluate your proposal. So it's important to also, in addition to reading the solicitation 22-586 and kind of keeping it in your back pocket and kind of reviewing it time to time, because it does have important descriptions of all these features I'm talking about, review the criteria, because that's what the reviewers are using to evaluate your proposal, regardless of the type of a review they're doing. These are the tools they're using. So again, intellectual merit, potential to advance knowledge, broader impacts are benefits to society and desired societal outcomes. And number 2, again, all these bullets 2 through 5 apply to both, not just intellectual merit, they apply to both. So number 2 tells us we're always looking for creative, original and potentially transformative concepts. But it's not enough to have a good idea. You have to be able to implement it. And so number 3 talks about having well-organized, well-reasoned plans based on sound rationale. And does it have a mechanism to assess success? Again, applying to both intellectual merit of the project and broader impacts. We look at the qualifications of the PI and the institution to conduct these activities. And are there adequate resources? Recall, when we were talking about budget, of aligning the resource, the budget is one part of your resources. Does that align with what you want to do in your proposal package? And so always good to review the review criteria, because that's what the reviewers are using to evaluate your career proposal. The broader impacts, again, I'll just spend a little time on this. It focuses again on the potential benefits of the research. Why should the public care about what you're doing? And there's lots of different ways of achieving the broader impacts. And in a lot of ways, I personally think this is a more difficult criteria to assess, because it can be achieved in so many different ways, including the research itself. So as a minimum, definitely make the case for what is the broader impact of the research itself. Oh, sorry. So broader impacts are basically, how your research results will be applied and will the general public care. I must say that for the broader impacts, NSF doesn't have a specific requirement for you to include a certain activity or a certain feature in your career proposal. I think, in my opinion, this is a form of bias that some reviewers sometimes have, and we kind of tell them, no, NSF does not have any requirements for a project to contain a specific activity. So make a strategic argument of what are the broader impacts if the project is funded. And in my opinion, it's okay to use resources at your institution, but make clear what happens because the grant is awarded. That basically maybe enriches that other infrastructure you're using. Basically make the case of what happens because the grant is awarded in terms of its broader impact. So this next feature, again, is really special to the career proposal, is this integration of research and education. And again, NSF gives you great flexibility. They don't give you a recipe. That, definitely read the solicitation 22-586 because there's a really good discussion on this particular feature of the career project and its objectives. But there's no single approach that NSF says for you to take. So think creatively, and what's based on your passions, what kind of educator you want to be, what kind of researcher and field you want to be. Because when you write from your passions, that really comes clear from the page, and the reviewers can really recognize that and also get excited about that. And it should really reflect, again, your own interests, but also probably make the argument of how it aligns with the needs of your institution and or department. And there's different expectations across all the discipline fields of NSF. So this is a topic that you could talk to the program director that you're thinking of submitting your career proposal of what are the typical norms and such. And of course, you can look at the abstracts of previous career proposals that have been funded as well. I think I've said some of these, but these are just some other thoughts to really think creatively and base the argument of research and education in their integration based on your passions and what you're trying to do. And I already said there's different expectations, and there's lots of ways you can do it. Again, NSF doesn't have a recipe or requirement. And so this might be something to talk about with your ideas with your mentors and your department chair as well. But this is a really key feature of the career proposal. And in some organizations at NSF, it's almost treated like a third criteria. I know in engineering, from my experience, and I can't speak for the other director, it's not to say it's not important, but I'm just saying from engineering, it is really almost treated like a third criteria. So the last kind of theme I want to talk about is, finding this, what I call a research home, where you're going to submit your proposal to because for a career proposal, it really is designed, you can only submit your proposal to one core program in a given cycle. So it's the way it's designed, you really have to design your project and do your homework. So you're making the most informed decision on where you're submitting your proposal to in terms of what program. And so we give you some contacts in this link where this is kind of the contacts of the people involved in career kind of at the division and directorate level. And think of us as shepherds. We might not know the direct answer of what program, but we can maybe help you, guide you along the way. But it takes a lot of legwork. It takes a lot of looking through all the program descriptions, looking at what has been awarded, see what resonates with the types of research questions that you want to put in your career proposal. I think we've talked about this week of how NSF is really designed on research topics. And so the Directorate for Biological Sciences, Engineering, Geosciences, STEM education, computer and information science and engineering, mathematical and physical sciences, and social, behavioral, and economic sciences all participate in the career program in terms of their core programs. So look at our website. It has improved the search for funding. It's still kind of kludgy, but we're trying to get better. But this is one resource to see what has been funded. You can use keywords and find out maybe projects that might be in your area, but also importantly, I think it was mentioned earlier in the conference of what programs might have funded those projects as well. And again, I give you our kind of shepherd link of people in the Career Coordinating Committee. This is just an award search capture. You can, again, use keywords and such, or a specific PI that might be in your field. You might want to see what that person has been funded by in terms of programs. You'll get the data that you'll get for a specific grant is the budget, who's the PI, the institution, and also an abstract. Sometimes we get questions, can we get proposals from NSF? And the answer is no. I think unless there's a situation where you do it through the Freedom of Information Act. It's really important to read program descriptions. There's mine in a shortened version because they describe the topics and the types of research questions that are typically addressed in the program. And you see the program descriptions are all fairly broad, some more broad than others, and you'll get the program contacts, and it's best to email for communicating with the program officer. And at the bottom, there's always a link of what has been funded, and that gives you an idea of at least that at that time that those things are funded. Now, that's not a predictor of future events, but it can give you an idea of what has been recently coming into the program and what has been funded. Common question we get is, my project spans more than one program. Either maybe you do multidisciplinary research, or maybe you're just kind of, it's not clear to you. So a couple of steps. It requires homework. That's why we want to get our career proposals done in enough time so you have all this homework done. Relook at your project scope. Can it be scaled back so that the key innovation really lies within one program description, one core program? That's really critical for the career program. Get your one-pager together. Again, we've been talking about this. It's not required, but it's a really, really good tool to use. The one-pager, talks about the research questions that you'll have in your project and what fundamental knowledge would result and why is it important, and use that as a tool to email program officers to get input on what we call program fit. And especially for this case, if you're and in the email, if it's two programs, maybe include both program directors of the two programs and say, hey, in the subject, you put career, because that's what we're looking for at this time of year in all of our emails we're getting, and, program fit question. And in the email say, hey, here's my one pager, and I'm just not clear whether it's program A or program B. Can I get some input? And so you get some feedback and listen, really digest what the program director is saying, because they're pretty good at knowing of what is kind of the scope of their programs. So if your project spans like two or more programs, I think that's definitely a case where you need to go step back and relook at the scope of the project. But as much as possible, you want to align your project in the types of research questions and activities so that it really fits, the bulk of it fits within one program. Now, on the cover sheet, you can include a secondary program, and there's no downside to doing that. And that information is used by the program officers for several things. We get the proposals in. We might notice, this proposal A also has my colleague's program B. So, I'll tell that program officer, hey, we might want to look at this proposal. And there's a couple of scenarios. We might, co-review it. We might, share reviewers or something, or just keep people apprised or something. So there's no downside for indicating if you think your project also kind of interfaces on another program, to indicate that on the cover sheet under, I think it's called a secondary program consideration. I think that's the exact language. I'm not sure. All right. So I'm trying to wrap up. So just career proposal ingredients. Again, it's this integrated plan that is doable within a 5-year period. I don't know if I've said that yet, but make sure that what you propose is doable within the 5-year period with the resources, and it's ambitious but feasible. And again, it has these two pillars of education and research, and how your proposal provides a compelling argument of how your activities are really integrated. So, the research benefits from your education plans, and your education plans benefit from your research. It has this required departmental letter, which its chief purpose is to confirm eligibility, that you meet the eligibility requirements as of the submission deadline date, which for this year is July 24th. You can include letters of collaboration. Of course, they have that stock sentence from the PAPBG and a budget that's consistent with the scope of the resources that you've included. You're writing to the reviewers who are using the intellectual merit and broader impacts criteria to evaluate your proposal. So they want to know, what's it about? Your objectives, how will you do it, the technical approach, can you do it? That's you and your facilities. And is it worth doing in terms of its intellectual merit, to the fundamental knowledge and the broader impacts of benefits to society and societal outcomes. And the career piece of it is, will it provide a firm foundation for you as a leader in education and research? I think I've been talking this time of the importance of talking to program directors, see us as your resource, but not to panic anyone, but we're already June 6th and the submission is July 24th. So if you haven't contacted program directors, I don't want to panic you. It might be a good idea to start doing that soon, because we can be of more help in your cycle of preparation sooner than later. I think that was one of our ask early, ask often, so that also applies for talking about your career proposal. Your career proposal, again, with this one pager that's not required, but it's a good tool to have, and use email to communicate to the program officer. They can confirm their opinion of program fit. And you can, maybe ask for a short Zoom session to talk about your project as well. One of the themes this week is the importance of volunteering to review. It's the best way to understand how NSF's external merit review process works. And there's not a better way to understand what goes into the structure and the various styles that might be used in a proposal. Of course, if you're eligible for the career proposal, you likely won't be selected as a career proposal reviewer, but there's tons of programs across NSF, all the core programs and special solicitations. We talked about, maybe emailing program officers your bio sketch, and in the subject line, put, I want to be a reviewer, and put expertise keywords in the email. And if you don't hear in a month or so or 2 months, you can always re-ping them. Similarly, for communicating about your career proposal one pager, if you don't hear all of a sudden, maybe in a week, give us a ping. We're being flooded with these requests now, and we're getting to them as much as possible. So if you have a question about your career proposal, maybe put career in the subject line, because that will help us prioritize that email. And I want to emphasize again this opportunity to learn all about research.gov and submitting your career proposal. And that webinar is this Friday at 2:00 Eastern. And I believe you can still sign up through the research.gov homepage. So really recommend that. And that's it. And thank you.
Thank you. So my question is, say as you start to prepare your proposal and you email your program director and you get some initial feedback, and then you start working on it, like from that point to your submission, is it appropriate at any point to get back to your director with the fuller fledged version of your proposal and discuss further details, get further feedback?
Program officers don't read proposals. We just read your one pager.
So between one pager and your final submission, there's no other points where it's appropriate for it to get more feedback from the.
Well, I think you want to make your, if you have an appointment with a program officer, make the most of it. Especially now, since it's June 7th, we're pretty slammed both with career and closeout, what we call the end of year action. So you want to make your discussions as efficient as possible. So get all your questions in during that one meeting.
The initial communication. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
We have a question from online. Do you have data on the percentage of proposals that are funded from the career program?
We do not have that external public information. We have internal data, but that's not something we share publicly. And frankly, that's really out of your control. So I think sometimes we get questions of, I should submit to this program versus that, because I think I might have a better funding, chance with program A versus program B. And that's probably not the wisest strategy to use. It's really the research questions and the fit to the program that determines where you should really submit your career proposal to, and that your lab probably spans more than one program. So, make sure your career proposal really fits as much as possible the program that you pick to submit to. So should I kind of go back? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Hi. I have two questions. The first has to do with the departmental letter. So it's kind of specific to my situation. So I'm in the Department of Radiology, but I'm also under the Division of Nuclear Medicine, and I have a division chief of nuclear medicine. So would the departmental letter come from the division chief or the department chair of the whole radiology department?
I would talk to both of them, but it's typically the function that determines your promotion and tenure type decisions. But I would talk to both of those two function people.
Okay. And my second question has to do with the proposal itself. So is there a requirement for preliminary data? And if so, how much is necessary and or expected for a successful career proposal?
Okay, preliminary data. This is not just for career proposals. So NSF does not require preliminary data. So this is a discussion point to have with your program director. In my opinion, preliminary data, it's basically two questions that reviewers have. One is your expertise to do the work. And this can be pointed with maybe preliminary data you have, but not necessarily. It could be also arguments that you pull from the literature. And the other aspect is you might have a piece of your project that is particularly risky, and that's okay. We're NSF. We want your high risk, high reward ideas. But reviewers don't like to see a project fall apart because a piece of the project that's particularly risky doesn't work the way. So preliminary data is kind of a feasibility test. So again, it's not necessarily your data, but it's that type of argument the reviewers want to know. So it could be preliminary data if you have it. It could be literature, it could be something similar. Those are the two main arguments that reviewers are trying to understand with, quote, preliminary data. It's not preliminary data for preliminary data's sake.
Thank you.
Let's go over to your left.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is about collaborating with user facilities such as a national lab. So these facilities usually require a approved user proposal before we can access their facilities. So before we have that, can we still propose in the career proposal to use their facilities to do research, at least part of the objectives or tasks? Because this is 5 years, so we have plenty of chances to write those user proposals.
I'm a broken record. That's something to talk to also with the program director of your program that you're going to submit to. Each program, in terms of the discipline, that program director and its community reviewers typically know the typical user facilities and how they work. And so in the proposal, to make clear of, that you're going to do the work at these user facilities and just to kind of line out, that the user proposals are needed. But I think in general, within a discipline area that, each discipline area might have different usual suspect user facilities and kind of know how they work. And so they pretty much know how they work and how it, and take that into account in your proposal. But to make clear that you would be using these facilities, to make that clear in your proposal.
Thank you.
Me? Okay. Hi, I have 3 questions. One is very straightforward. So what happens to your career award if you change institutions?
So career award is a grant, and the grant is made to the institution. So if you move to another institution, it's basically a decision made between institution A and institution B, the new one. They can agree to transfer the grant from A to B, but that's not an NSF decision. That's a decision between the institutions, and then it's an action that you do through research.gov, and a new grant is awarded to institution B with the unremained budget, and it moves. The one kink in that is if your career project is funded with EPSCoR funds. And so EPSCoR funds cannot be transferred to a non-EPSCoR jurisdiction. So if you're from an EPSCoR state and you receive a career award with EPSCoR funding, so that's it's not that you're an EPSCoR state, it's you received EPSCoR funding as part of the co-funding for your career proposal. That's important. It's the money. It's the money. It's not the EPSCoR state. It's the EPSCoR money. EPSCoR money does not transfer to a non-EPSCoR jurisdiction. So you would have to work with your research office again. It's again another transfer. So the institutions have to agree. But the budget, only the budget that is non-EPSCoR would transfer that hasn't been spent. And, the business offices at NSF and your research office would kind of figure out how much is left over. And then the EPSCoR funds then would be returned, I believe, to Treasury via NSF. Yeah.
Thank you. The other one is, so I understand that we can't have co-PIs, but it seems like we can have sub-awards and career proposals. Do you have any advice for how to strategically, if you're doing a collaborative proposal or actually an interdisciplinary proposal when you want to have collaboration, to have any advice on how to include and manage sub-awards in your proposal, in your career proposal?
Again, in a career proposal, no co-PIs on the cover sheet because the career proposal is all about you as the PI. You are allowed budget for senior personnel and subcontracts and consultants. I'll go back to that. It's all about you. So you gotta design your project that I wouldn't phrase it as a collaborative project because a career proposal is all about you. So you want to make sure that the roles of these additional components that you might have, whether it's a sub-award, senior personnel or collaborators, that they're not doing a major role in the contribution to the intellectual merit and the broader impacts of the project. It's kind of, it's a shading thing. You can have them, but you have to design your project so it's not, you don't give the perception that it's basically the equivalent of maybe a collaborative proposal that you might submit to a core program that has, a PI and a co-PI type of thing.
Right, but would it be okay then, for example, if there is like one aspect of my proposal that I don't have the expertise to do or something related to like programming or something, can I have a sub-award do that part and
Yes, you can. Yes, you
That's
can.
fine.
But again, I'm just saying for a career proposal, you're making the case to the reviewers of this education and research plan for your career as a researcher and educator. So you want to make sure you're just making the case that it's mostly about you and it's not like a team project.
all right?
Yes, you're allowed.
Okay, the last question, what are the most common mistakes that people make when they submit career proposals?
Well, first of all, make sure you know your institution's timeline. Again, talked about that really painful meeting we have after the submission date for late submission requests, which most of them, unless there's a natural disaster, the answer is probably no for late submission. I think you can talk to your program director of your program as well. I think it's in general of not having a good motivation for the research questions that you have, of knowing, making the case to the reviewers that you know the literature, you've identified a research gap. And not only that, it's an important research gap to fill because the knowledge which you name is important to the field, and you state why, and you make a compelling argument of what are the broader impacts. And for career proposal, of making this case of how the research and education activities really enrich each other. So I would say definitely get your proposal done in time that you can have other people read it. I went back to knowing the review environment because that's your audience. So in a lot of areas of NSF, it might be kind of almost a multidisciplinary panel might be reviewing it. So you might have kind of these two levels of a communication, of communicating to the expert in your field, but also communicating to someone else who's in the room that is kind of an expert in that program description, but maybe not exactly what you're doing. So it has these two levels of education that you're writing to as well. And just making sure it's clear. And that's why I say to have enough time to have other people read it, because at some point you can't tell the difference. You've looked at it too much. So it's good to have a good set of eyes who can understand the arguments that you're making. They might not be an expert in what exactly you're doing, but they can understand the arguments that you're making.
Okay, we'll take one from online. If my career proposal is declined from a program once, do you recommend submitting to a different program for the second or third time? So giving up on the first program that declined me, going to another, assuming it's not, directly related to a lack of fit with the program and the work is interdisciplinary.
That's a tough decision that unfortunately you need to make. Again, kind of discourage chasing programs in terms of finding programs that might have a better percentage of awarding your proposal. That's not how it works. It's your research questions. Your research questions determines where you should submit your proposal, not chasing, oh, I think program A might have a better chance for me. So if you got a review that the reviewers were pretty clear that the research questions and what you had in your project are just not compelling, and it's really not fixable, that might be a decision you make. And that's if you're going to another program, presumably that's a new proposal that you're doing, and you can do it. You have 3 tries to go through review, but I think for any declined career proposal, it's important to, after you get the reviews, and if it was discussed by a panel summary, you reflect on them. And after a couple of weeks, because it is very disappointing, email the cognizant program officer for a Zoom call about your career proposal. And you can talk about the proposal. The career director the program director won't say, yeah, do another program, do a new proposal. We're going to say, what happened in the review. But through the discussion, that might give you additional information on whether you rework the proposal you have or put together a whole new topic. So, on this side.
Well, my question is that are the chances of get funded by career program the same in different programs? Like if I fund my proposal, fit different program, even under a different directorate. So how do I make the choice?
You make the choice of where you submit based on the research questions of your proposal. Again, funding and funding percentages we don't share, and actually it's out of your control. It's not something you have any control over. So the only control you have is to write a compelling proposal. So again, it's your research questions that you use to determine where you should submit your career proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Hi. So there was an emphasis earlier that the career proposals include a letter from the department chair. And it should not be a letter of support, but rather a letter of like verifying your eligibility. Do PIs have access to that letter ahead of time? Like, is it submitted by the PI as part of the proposal package, or is it submitted by the department chair, like individually, like directly from them to NSF?
I don't know how it's done. It's your institution is submitting the proposal. So it's a required piece of the proposal. Again, Stephanie, do you have a?
The applicant or the PI takes the letter from the department and uploads it in research.gov as a section in your application.
Yeah, so it's a required section of the proposal. So between you and your research office, they should have access to the departmental letter because it is a required piece. And if it's not part of a proposal after the deadline, it's returned without review. I'm just getting started here.
Thank you. You mentioned that non-tenure track faculty is potentially eligible. How can one ensure eligibility before starting to work on the proposal? So I'm a clinical assistant professor.
So you have to work with your departmental chair or departmental chair equivalent to determine if you meet the eligibility criteria, because we get lots of questions about eligibility. There's several in our facts document 22-100. Again, that's another good thing to download because we have at least 35 different questions that are already answered, but eligibility is one of them. And NSF strictly doesn't determine eligibility. So you need to work with your department chair or equivalent to whether they think that your position meets the eligibility criteria that has educational and research activities, responsibilities, and that it's expected to last the years of the 5 years. Again, it's not that NSF is not asking the institution to make promises of employment.
Right.
But again, that's up to you working with that function to say, do I meet the eligibility criteria? And then having the letter put together that basically addresses how you meet the eligibility criteria in that required departmental letter.
Sure. And is there a once a year deadline, or it's like every 6 months?
No, the career proposal is yearly.
Okay.
The submission deadline is under the current solicitation is the 4th Wednesday in July.
Okay. Thank you.
At 5 p.m. local time.
Yeah.
Should the career proposal include one 5-year-long project, or can it include multiple related projects?
That's a decision that you as a PI make. Again, it should be for the activities, it should be doable within the 5-year period. So the activities you have to support education and research should be doable within the 5-year. It could be the same theme. That's really a story that you're telling to the reviewers. This is something, discussing with some colleagues over the years. One theme that I thought was really helpful was, then I found personally with my experience in reviewers in my program, is reviewers are looking at, for career proposals, they're evaluating, what's included, the 5 years of research and the educational activities. But for the research, again, this is your opportunity to be really foundational, build this foundation. And so one aspect, they're looking at what you're proposing to do. And they're also kind of thinking, hey, can I see future proposals coming out of this foundational work? Kind of thinking you're building kind of the tree trunk, can they see the kind of the branches coming out of this investment of your career proposal? So that's a decision that you make, whether you have one single research theme or related topics. Go ahead.
Hi, if you are eligible when you get your award, but say a year or two into it, you get a promotion and you're no longer eligible, do you get to keep the award or
Yes,
do you
you do.
lose it?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
No, take that back. No.
Thank you.
No, it's your, again, it's your status as of the submission date. So you must meet the criteria as of the submission date. So we get a lot of questions about tenure. You know, if my tenure decision is August 1st, well, the submission date is July 24th. And so if you meet the submission requirements as of July 24th of being untenured and meeting all the other requirements, then you're eligible. Well, NSF doesn't determine eligibility, but your departmental letter would make the case that you're eligible. But if you get promoted right afterwards and it's in place right after the submission deadline, congratulations, you still get your project, yes.
Question from online. Does receiving a small or medium-sized grant from a program impact your chances of receiving a career award from the same program? Or do you recommend waiting to submit other proposals until after applying to career?
That might be also a question to ask the program director of the program you're thinking submit to. The research questions should be all different. You know, these are different grants, different sets of research questions. So it's a different independent event, the review of your career proposals, as long as you made the case to the reviewers, because in the career proposal, again, you have that current and pending section. If you have a NSF grant that you put in the project description. So you're also making the case to the reviewers that what I have in my career proposal is different from my other funded grant that you can see in my, not current and pending, prior support, sorry, the prior support section. You make the case to reviewers as that's also different from the NSF prior support. So yes, you can submit a career proposal if you have an NSF grant in the same program. They just have to be different research questions.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, perfect. All right, question about educational activities. So does that necessarily mean it needs to be traditional classroom instruction, or could they be things like working in the community to provide workforce training and those types of alternative educational activities?
NSF doesn't have any specific requirements of what you do. So follow your passions and what makes sense given your type of department, your type of position, your type of institution. I will say, in general, in my opinion, you need to make the case that what you're including as part of your proposal is above your current responsibilities. Because I tell reviewers have they made a case of what happens because a grant is awarded? And so you want to make sure it's stuff that you're not doing now as part of your current responsibilities. But I think when you follow your passions and make it specific of what is actually done during the grant period, you know, reviewers react to that. But NSF doesn't have any specific requirements that you include how you achieve it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I know one of the criteria is to demonstrate ourselves as independent researchers. So do you see any downsides if we include our PhD advisor as our senior personnel, or if we propose that we are going to use his lab or her lab as for doing some part of the work, but although the research is totally different? So I just want to know about this. Thank you.
I think I'm a broken record, but this is kind of also a subject to maybe talk to the program director of the program that you're thinking submit to, because there might be cultural norms, you know, across the research communities that NSF serves. I'd say in general, from what I've heard from reviewers, they always like to see in a career proposal that you have distinguished or you kind of separated yourself from your PhD advisor in terms of your research that you're going to do. You're kind of establishing yourself as an independent from your PhD advisor. So I would talk to the program director, but that's kind of what my experience with reviewers of wanting to see that independence, that kind of step away from what you were doing for your PhD research.
Okay, thank you.
Is it recommended to first have publications as the lead or the only senior author before career submission to demonstrate independent research capability?
Could you repeat that?
Would you recommend first having publications as the lead or the only senior author before career submission to demonstrate independent research capability?
I think the norms, again, might vary across the disciplines. Again, I don't think there's any specific requirements that you have any specific types of publications. Again, go back to the criteria. You know, one of the criteria is that you have the expertise to do the work. So there's various ways that you make that case, one of which might be publications in the field. But that that's kind of a gray area. NSF doesn't really have a specific requirement of what you include for required references, other than there's a required reference section in the proposal. Sorry about that for that answer. Just kind of a vanilla one.
And is there a listing anywhere of which programs, accept career proposals, or should you go by directorate and click through?
Yes, I believe that each program description indicates whether it accepts career proposals or not on the program description. And I think at the division level, I think it as well. I forget, I don't think the career solicitation, if you look at the PDF, I don't think it has all the programs, because then the PDF would be like 50 pages or something like that. But I would look at, start at a division level of what the programs are. And I think it indicates, I think certainly at the program description level, whether they participate in career. In general, pretty much all the core programs, all the discipline programs in the most directorates. I got a question earlier this week, does TIP participate in career? And currently the programs of TIP do not participate in career. I can't predict the future, but as of this solicitation, TIP programs don't participate in career.
Hey, I have a question about course buyout. So as a course buyout that you can put in a budget, sometimes is calculated based on your salary. And when you put that as a big budget item, but sometimes when department hires someone, they hire a part-timer is less expensive. So what happens to that difference? Can you repurpose that and put it for other personnel and hire students and things like that?
I think that's a budget question to kind of work with your research office to make sure you're putting what is allowable or not on the budget. I don't think that's really specific to career. Whether you include budget for course buyout, talk to the program director of your program that you're going to submit to. It is allowed, especially for those institutions where you have heavy teaching loads, like, for example, primarily undergraduate institutions. But I think that's kind of a general requirements under the PAPPG of what can be included as part of a budget.
I have a somewhat related question. To what extent do you all consider cost of living when thinking about budgets? Like just knowing that salaries, graduate student stipends and such will be impacted by places where the cost of living is high, like New York or California. And then as a secondary piece, is there an expectation that graduate students are funded for the full duration of a career, like for a student being funded for a full 5 years through the career mechanism, or does that not matter?
I think NSF recognizes that all these costs are increasing for graduate students, postdocs, as well as the general cost of research. That's why personally, I don't get into dollar values, but more units. I want to emphasize, in my opinion, I think it's best, and that's part of the criteria, again, it says, does the project have the resources that aligns with what you had to do the intellectual merit and broader impacts? Make sure that's aligned, and the budget is part of that. And so for the review phase, and budget is definitely a topic to talk to of the program director of the program you're submitting to. But in general, I think it's important to include the resources that you need to do the project so that they're aligned for the review phase. Every project selected for negotiation of award is subject to budget negotiations depending upon the climate. It's not something we like to do, but it's sometimes we have to do. But I think in general, it's probably because you're trying to address the criteria, make sure that you put the resources you need to do the project. And typically it's a 5-year project, so you'll want to have your resources for the 5-year project.
Any other questions online? Okay, thank you, Carole, very much.